Our hostess, who closed an hour early tonight so we could have this great facility for our presentation. And you probably know who the players are behind this. A little bit of intrigue and subversion. Jackson County, the Rogue Valley Transportation District, and ODOT. Nathan and Jenna are our presenters of this. They did all the press work, and I just got to tell you that this sets kind of a gold standard for small communities in terms of getting a turnout, and I guarantee you that at the end of the night you will really have a working familiarity of the bicycle laws that I think will serve you and the community well when you go out there. So, and that's my goal. I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, to save your questions for the end. At 7 o'clock, I'll make myself available until we're mutually exhausted to answer every question you may have. And the reason that I'd like for you to please hold your questions is because I've got so much information that I want to tell you about. 25 years ago, when I began to call myself a bicycle lawyer, I did it because my first case involved an investigator who worked for me who got hit on his bike while he was investigating a case. And what I found was that the laws for bicyclists are kind of a separate, distinct breed of law, and that bicyclists have kind of a mutant hybrid existence in the law, which is partly historically based because, after all, we were here first. We created the good roads. We graciously allowed the motor vehicles to share our roads. We were the ones who were organized, and we allowed them to share our place on the road with us. And over the years, the last 100 years, what we've done is sometimes held on by our fingernails to the fact that we do like no one else. There is no user group, not equestrians, not people with wheelbarrows, not rollers, not bladers, not pedestrians. No one has a right to share the lane with motorized traffic except bicyclists. And it's kind of a fight sometimes to do that, because in some ways, and I'm very appreciative that governmental agencies are supportive of our educational efforts, those powers that be would like to relegate us to the side of the road. And people like me take a fierce advocacy role in saying that if you don't want us to ride in a particular place, please give us some place that is so much better that we don't want to ride in that clunky old place. But don't make it illegal for us to ride across a bridge or to go someplace where we have a legal right to ride, just because you decide that it's not in our best interest or that it is a bother to create safe facilities for us. So underneath this pleasant exterior that you see before you is really somebody who has spent 25 years poking at different governmental entities, trying to get them to do their jobs in providing us with safe facilities and also to preserve our right to the roadway. And because the laws are pretty well known, the rules of the road are pretty well known by most folks who go through driver's training, I'm not really going to focus on that. What instead I want to focus on are those rules, both good rules and awful rules, that we have to deal with as bicyclists so that we can know what our rights and responsibilities are. And of course the problem is, in the transportation package on the roads, it's my view that motorists and bicyclists and pedestrians oftentimes treat each other with a mixture of ignorance and suspicion. And the reason for it is that we don't, if you push us, really know what is our right to the road. When do the cars have to stop when pedestrians want to cross in a crosswalk? When is it that we do and don't have the right of way where? And so what happens is sometimes we're sort of tiptoeing around each other, sometimes we're a little bit rough with each other, but if we can make it so that as bicyclists we know what our rights are and our responsibilities, then it makes us able to assert our rights in a positive way. And that's what this is all about. And to give you what I hope is going to be a useful a useful tool for that. This is really a improvised explosive device on the road. Novel concept. Bicyclists have a right to the road. And this book is designed, it's now in its 7th edition, and it's designed to provide you with the tools that you need to really know what the laws are. Not the laws necessarily according to me, because the laws are reproduced in here in the actual way in the Oregon Revised Statutes that they exist circa right now. And to the extent that this book is behind, you'll see there's, and I'm glad to report that it is behind, because the 2011 legislature changed a couple laws, and we actually have inserts in the book that I'll talk about, which updates it. It's also available online. Somebody asked me today, well, can I reprint it? Can I make copies of it? And I said, you can not only copy it, but you can print it as a PDF off of our website and distribute it as well as you want. I mean, it's a resource for you. And so the way that a lot of people allow themselves to exist in a state of ignorance, even though they're very experienced bicyclists, is that the law is sort of daunting. And when I went to law school 3 decades ago, what I learned was a lot of it is just about the lingo. Just learning the vocabulary, the weird paragraph structure, and kind of the syntax makes it so that you're not so shy when it comes down to the question of, well, what is the law anyway? And the other part of it is this. One of the things that we learned in law school, and one of the reasons that people loathe lawyers, is that lawyers learn that that which is not taken away is given. Novel concept, really. That which is not taken away is given. So oftentimes in the law, what you'll see are prohibitions. And what you have to do is kind of puzzle through all the things that are made to be illegal to figure out what's not illegal after all of that. And that is what you've got. And so what I do tonight, hopefully, is to help you go through that same process so you can see that after all the laws taking away and granting, what is it that we have? What is our right to the road, and what are the rules that govern us? And this book is designed to help you do it, because not only do I have the Oregon Revised Statutes in it, and that's not like according to me. These are the actual laws. They are the way they are in the ORS circa right now. But I also put these little gray boxes. If you look through the book, you'll see these little boxes, and those are parentheticals that I put in there for you, which tell you what I think is notable about some particular feature of the law. And there is also a collection of articles that I've written. And as I said in Medford today, I am a compulsive writer of articles about bicycles in the law. So if you were to say bicycles and police officers, bicycles and guns, bicycles and driver's licenses, I've probably written an article about it. And if you look in the book, you will see that at the back of the book there are actually 3 pages of titles alone, going on, I think, 138, 139, and 140 of just some of the articles that I've written. So if I don't go into a considerable detail about something and you have a question, take a look in the articles. If you don't find it in the articles, call me or email me, and I will attempt to write an article about whatever it is. In fact, I won't be able to quit until I try to write an article about whatever it is. So, tonight I want to spend 50 minutes with you, with many speakers. You want to give them polite attention and not look at anything else. But I'm a different kind of speaker because I want you to engage with and internalize the law and develop a relationship with these books, which you'll get a chance to take with you. So I'm going to tell you where the laws are that I'm talking about, and I think that there's enough light in here that if you would do me the favor of looking at the laws while I talk about them, if you can, what will happen will be that at the end of this, if there's a question that you have so that you can get into an argument with somebody who really knows about the law, like a taxi cab driver, you won't be shy about going to the bike book and finding out what the law is, and then you can say to them, by clipping and snipping, scanning or faxing the law itself, what the law is, and you can know about it. You may not remember the exact text, but you can remember that maybe it was in there. And I hope that this is something that you'll find to be useful as you go out. So I have probably, I think 10 laws that I want to talk to you about. And I'm going to try to be done by 10 till 7. and then I will answer all the questions. For those of you who need to leave, go ahead, that's fine. The bathrooms are back here. If you want to get up and get snacks, that's totally fine. I'm absolutely fine with you getting up and moving about. So feel free to use this space. The main thing I want to do is to really have you learn this stuff so that later you can look at it and know where you stand with the law. And why am I so driven to want to do this? Because you are an embattled minority on the roadways. The fact is that not only are some of the laws, but the laws of physics and the laws of numbers are against you. Mass and velocity is not so good for us. We don't have steel exoskeletons. When we bump up against the motorized traffic, we don't get a crumpled fender. We get a broken collarbone. And so what we have to do is to be and do what embattled minorities have done since the beginning of time, which is to substitute with hustle and gumption that which we don't have in numbers, mass, and velocity. And so the whole idea here, folks, is to put this into your hands so you can go out there and really know where you stand with the laws. And the laws relating to bikes are a mishmash. We've oftentimes been kind of the poor cousin. The fact is that we are the transportation option of second to last resort. Last resort is walking, right? And so oftentimes when people think about bicyclists, they think about people who are transporting themselves by second to last resort. And those are folks who are like going on the wrong side of the road at night without lights and maybe not really thinking about very much at all. Or bike messengers in Portland. But the fact of the matter is, as a bicycle lawyer, I can tell you that it's getting to be easier and easier to be someone who represents bicyclists in the legislature, in the courts, and on the streets, because for the first time, police officers, judges, jurors, and legislators, when they think about bicyclists, they're thinking about how it is that their grandchild went on Cycle Oregon this year. Their wife goes out with her group of friends riding in the neighborhood. Their son was racing in the cyclocross series last year. It's not like we're a different breed of freak anymore. Bicycling has become mainstream in Oregon, and we're leading the country. And in our Oregon legislature, because of that, we've developed over the last 2 decades some laws that are leading the country in bicycle laws. Now, I'm not expecting you to become bike walk geese at the end of this. However, let me tell you that you can be proud of the work we've done in the legislature. And if you ever have an opportunity to serve on jurors, and serve as jurors on juries, please do it. I just had jury service last week in Multnomah County, and I can tell you that as a person who represents bicyclists, we are the minority in terms of numbers. You really don't want to be in a situation where you ever have to go into court and the people that you see in the jury box are people who are serving on a jury because they don't have anything that's more interesting to do. No, you do not want that to be your jury. You want people who are so busy that they're willing to come in because they think it's important so that the jury really represents a cross-section of the community. And if as a bicycle lawyer, I go into court and I see that I've got 12 motorists who don't have anything else to do and have not ridden a bicycle since they were in 6th grade, I think, oh boy, have I got my hands full, because I really have to bring them up to speed. Riding a high-performance modern bicycle is so much different from the way that we rode bikes when we were kids that it's kind of difficult for people to understand. So please serve on juries if you have an opportunity to do it. Now, I'm just going to go through some of these laws with you, and if you don't mind, just please go to page 60, because this is the first law I want to talk to you about. This is, well, first let's get the lingo. The lingo in the law is this. It's just like with the soda machine. If you put in the right combination of change, you get the soda pop. In the law, so much has to do with just knowing the lingo. And the lingo is funny because it's almost nonsensical. When you're talking about the law, the way that you describe the law is ORS, and then you say the number. ORS means Oregon Revised Statute. And the number doesn't mean anything. Every law's got a different number. It's like the Dewey Decimal Code. Every time the legislature passes a new law, they don't know where the hell to put it. So they put 005 on the previous statute, put this in the middle of it, And there it goes. If you try to make the number system of the ORS make sense, you'll go crazy. But you want to have the numbers because the laws are contained in a compilation of laws, the Oregon Revised Statutes, that is somewhat at least numerical. And that's the way we sort them and stuff them. So ORS 810.150 on page 60 is called drain construction. This is an important one for you, and I want to deputize all of you as citizen vigilantes to make it so that the storm drains in this town and this community can be ridden over safely. Because if you look at paragraph 1, you'll see that it requires that storm drains be capable and designed and installed so that bicycle traffic may pass over the drains safely without obstruction or interference. This is not a situation where you are protecting yourselves from riding into the storm drain along your bike route home by mistake. It's not going to be you who does it. You're a vigilante on behalf of others. It's going to be the tourist who's here from Holland who gets surprised by a motorist who beeps at him, and he rides into a storm drain that has not been retrofitted, that was there for 5 years, that you knew about, and it eats his front wheel up to the front hub, sending him over the handlebars and ending his cross-country trip at its very beginning on the West Coast. And you could change it by using the universal loathing and fear of lawyers. Because you can get a hold of the maintenance department and you can say, do you know that down on Southwest 4th Street, there is a bicycle tire eating drain that's really going to hurt somebody. It could be easily retrofitted. It's against the law. And when they get hurt, they're going to get a lawyer. They're going to sue our poor little community. You're going to get in trouble because you violated the law. I'm going to have to pay for it as a taxpayer. And what we've got to do is team up on this and fix it now. And if they aren't willing to do it because of their civic pride, their maintenance pride, maybe they will do it because they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble or get sued. So go through all of those, appeal to all their better and more base characteristics to help us, one by one, change these. And all of these drain systems can be retrofitted with cross bracing so that it may not be a pleasant experience to ride over it, but it will not eat your front tire and cause serious injury to somebody who's not expecting it. Next, I am so happy to tell you that Oregon, I think, has the best pedestrian laws in the United States. And if you go on page 60 and 61, you will see ORS 811.028, and there's an addition sheet in the book which contains the new version of it. And the reason I'm so proud of this is that you bicyclists are pedestrians when you're on the crosswalk, crossing in a crosswalk, and when you're on the sidewalk. You have all the rights as pedestrians, which is really important because motorists have to yield to you. And I'm going to talk to you about it a little bit. But some law enforcement folks do not know that when we ride our bike in a crosswalk, we have the same legal entityship as a pedestrian, and motorists have to yield to us. And so the law that says you must stop and remain stopped applies to motorists, for bicyclists and pedestrians, and the law is wonderful because what it gives pedestrians is they have the right-of-way in a crosswalk and a right of safe passage across 2 lanes in a regular intersection, or if there's a walk, don't walk signal, a lane and a half, a lane of 6 feet. What that means is that bicyclists and pedestrians attempting to cross the road in crosswalks are not traffic pylons. We are not objects to speed around and buzz in an irritated fashion as motorists. We must be yielded to. And this law is a wonderful law because not only does it give us legal empowerment, it also takes away the excuse by law enforcement folks who fail to enforce kids' rights to have the right-of-way in the crosswalk when they're trying to ride to school. We do not want to have it be a litmus test in modern society where every parent asks themselves, do I love my child? Yes, no. And if the answer is yes, therefore I will give my child a ride to school every morning in the steel capsule called our car because it is too dangerous on the streets to allow my child to walk or ride to school. What we want to do is to make it so that parents know that the law enforcement officers are enforcing children's rights so that children will not get to 9th grade and not know how to walk to school or how to ride their bike to school. And this law goes a long way toward that because, and this is the part I'm so proud of, the last year's legislature created a trigger, and it's in bold on this page, that says Oregon Crosswalk Law, which is that if a bicyclist takes their front tire off of the curb and merely places it into the road, if a pedestrian takes their foot off of the curb and puts it in the road, if you take your cane tip, if you take your wheelchair wheel and put it in the road, you no longer have to go out in front of the cars into the killing zone to make the cars stop. All you have to do is to take and make that signal, and the cars have to stop. And, of course, for law enforcement folks, what you can tell them is they don't have to be confused or reluctant or shy about citing drivers who fail to stop for people who are trying to get the right-of-way in crosswalks. If they see motorists failing to stop for that kid or that elder who's got their foot off the curb in the crosswalk, they should be giving tickets to those people. They should be giving tickets to those people so that those people have an understanding of what the law requires. And this is a brand new law, just went into effect. And the idea for it is to make it so that you don't have to stand wistfully on the curb wishing somehow that you could make the car stop. You can put your foot or your wheel into the road and you don't have to step out in front of cars to make them stop. And what is it that is this crosswalk, this wonderful place? A crosswalk is marked as an obvious marked crosswalk right out here across the Safeway store. That's easy. There's also an unmarked crosswalk. And an unmarked crosswalk has the same force and effect as a marked crosswalk. If you took a kid, a 12-year-old, gave him a can of spray paint and said, okay, go out there and paint a crosswalk where a crosswalk should be, the kid, after they sprayed a few fences and windows, would probably settle down and paint a crosswalk on the street just where a crosswalk should be. Every four-corner intersection has a crosswalk connecting the sidewalks on each corner. That's the crosswalk. And when you step into that crosswalk, even though there's no paint on the road designating it as such, you get that same force and effect. And let me tell you that this is very important because when you're wearing your pedestrian hat, you don't have the right-of-way anywhere in the road except in the crosswalk. So it's very important. You've got to use the place where you've got the power, and that's in the crosswalk on the roadway. So next, let's talk about an easy one. On page 61, RSA 11.050, this is the law that says that you've got the right-of-way in a bicycle lane. This used to be kind of a question mark for some people, like they pretended they didn't know about bike lanes or they didn't know how to drive in bicycle lanes. Well, that stuff, bicycle lanes have been around long enough. Nobody has any excuse for not knowing how to drive around bicyclists and bike lanes. And the law is, as you know, you've got the right-of-way in bicycle lanes. There's no excuse for not knowing how to drive around it because the bicycle lane is no different from any lane. If you've got a 4-lane roadway, 2 lanes in each direction, and somebody's in the slow lane and you're in a fast lane in a car, you don't turn your car into them and collide with them or cut them off. You wait until they go by in the slow lane and then you get in the slow lane too. And it's the same way in bike lanes. There's nothing mysterious about it at all. The only difference is that car drivers, like when they ride hook us, they know that if they speed up and turn in front of us, that instead of us hitting them like a semi-truck would, we will make a face, maybe a hand gesture, and slow down because we don't want to collide with them because we'll be the ones who get hurt. So we have the force of law there, we just don't have the force of mass. But the law is very clear. Another law where there's really no legal excuse for motorists failing to know about it is on page 61, RSA 11.055. And take a look at this one. How many times have you been riding on a sidewalk, you get up to a driveway or to an entrance to a shopping center, you see a motorist, the motorist sees you, they know you want to ride through, they are in a hurry or there's a break in traffic, and they kind of engage in this little ballet like, are you really going to ride in front of my car? Do you feel lucky today? No. there's no question about it. They must yield the right-of-way to you, just like you're a locomotive train on the sidewalk. And there's no, like, excuses for it. Motorists must yield the right-of-way to bicyclists on sidewalks. And I'm going to talk to you about some places you cannot ride on sidewalks, and in the city of Ashland. And I'm going to go into that in a few minutes. But the bottom line is, bicyclists can ride in the street, on the bike lane, or on the sidewalk, as you choose. You've got a historic right to ride in all of these places. And there are certain limitations on it. I'm going to take you through them because we've actually put together some sections in the book which I think will be helpful for you. We also have a right to ride on the freeways. And there's an article in here, we have a right to the freeway, but which freeway? Oregon administrative rules say that bicyclists have a right to ride on all roads, including freeways, except there are certain places, like up at the Medford interchange, where bicyclists cannot ride. And there's an article in here that contains this actual law, and you can take a look at it. But basically, it's a situation where unless there's some sign telling you you cannot ride there, you have a right to ride there. And for people who are training for triathlons and things like that, access to the freeways is very important. I told you in the beginning tonight that there are some laws that Oregon has passed that are a national standard. And one of them is contained on page 62. It's ORS 811.065. Senator Floyd Perzansky created this law to honor his friend and riding companion, Jane Higdon, a well-known and very loved triathlete who was killed on Territorial Road in Eugene by a passing log truck. And this law is so important because it sets a national standard. In Oregon, the law used to be that when passing a bicyclist, you have to give a safe distance to them, a safe passing distance. Well, what does that mean? That varies from one person to the next. This law, which went into effect in 2008, creates a standard that is the best, I think, law in the country. Because what it says is that when passing a bicyclist, and this is where the speed is above 35 miles an hour only, it doesn't apply in low speed zones, the motorist must give the bicyclist sufficient space so that, and this is the car, this is the bicyclist, so that if the bicyclist was to fall over, let's put it this way, if the bicyclist was to fall over into the lane of travel, the motorist would not hit the bicyclist. So what does that mean? Well, in my case, it means giving me about 6 feet of space, because on a bicycle, I'm about 6 feet tall. So at speeds above 35 miles an hour, the motorist must give the bicyclist sufficient space, which is what we call fallover distance. And it's a nice gauge because all the motorist has to do when passing is to take a look at the bicyclist and see how much space to give by mentally using it to say, okay, well, that's about how much space the bike needs, and then they go around that way. And one nice thing about this law and about the nature of a cooperative relationship on the road is that just like hysteria, which is sort of a basic human trait, cooperation is contagious. Cooperation is contagious. And we've all, in my view, got an innate cooperative gene that's part of the human genome. And you can see that cooperative gene come forth anytime you see a bunch of people at a Trailblazer game, or at the county fair, or at the New York City subway, or any place that there's a whole bunch of us. Because there's no rules. When you're walking through the airport, there's no like right, left, yield, all these signs and stuff like we've got on the road. How many people do you see with broken noses from head-on collisions when we're trying to walk around each other? What happens? You know, there are like studies done. We're like a bunch of amoebas or something. Somehow we have all these people. We don't have any. There's no right way, wrong way, left, right. And we manage not to hurt each other by bumping into each other. Why is it when we get on the roads where we've got all these laws and all these rules, we've got driver's licenses, that we're always bumping into each other? I don't know, but what I think we got to do is to develop practices and laws that free our innate sense of cooperation. And one of the things that I told you at the beginning of this is I think cooperation, like hysteria, spreads. So, and I'll show you how you can do it. If you follow this law when you're passing bicyclists in your car, by giving them a wide berth, what you'll see is that the motorists in front of you who are passing those bicycles have varying degrees of penuriousness, stinginess, in giving space to the bicyclists. And if you give them a whole bunch of space, and then after you go around them, you watch your rear view mirror, what you'll see is that one or two cars probably behind you will give the bicyclists more space than they would have otherwise. They are inspired by you, right? And then they kind of go back to the way they were. So if we set a standard of cooperation, then it makes it so that people are influenced by us. And it's a two-way street. We can do it when we're in our cars towards bicyclists, or we can do it on our bicycles toward cars. I've got some fun examples that I give. Like, for example, when I'm at a light and I'm going straight and I see a motorist behind me who's got their right-hand turn signal on, I realize I'm probably plugging them because they can't turn right because I'm there. So I'll move my bike over to the left, and they'll see me doing it. First they wonder, am I turning around to spit on them or something? Because, you know, people do, motorists do kind of tend to, in these times, expect the worst out of bicyclists. You know, when you talk to motorists, they say about the bicyclists, oh, just don't get mad at me. Or, I don't want to hurt you. You know, I mean, they're really afraid of us now because we're sort of like the new urban deer. You know, they think, well, what, are you going to go left, you're going to go right, you're going to jump on my car, what are you going to do? I just don't want to hit you. Don't sue me, you know? So these motorists, they see me like moving out of my way so that they can go around, and I can't tell you how many times somebody looks at me like, oh, thank you. You know, and they really appreciate it. And what that does, of course, is it makes it so that we develop these cooperative, like, ground rules with people that we can then use, because one thing I can tell you don't want is a bunch of grumpy motorists around bicyclists. You know, they're bigger, they're faster, and, you know, we want them to be kind of happy for us and with us. So what I suggest to you is that you think about ways that you can kind of show that cooperative spirit. If I had a jersey that I would ride around close traffic situations, it would be, let me help you pass me. And the reason for it is that I don't want to have somebody behind me irritated with me. I want them to go around me. I want them to, you know, to give me enough space. And the fall over distances, I think, sets a wonderful standard. And for those of you who have friends in law enforcement, I would say that 90% of law enforcement folks do not know about this law. Help them to know about it, because not only does it create a nice rule, it also takes away excuses, because in the old days, nobody really knew what a safe passing distance was. But now we've got a clear standard for it. And we need to say, look, when they buzz us, bust them, give them tickets. Those are the dangerous motorists. Rough driving may be okay at NASCAR, but it's not okay on the streets of our communities, really. It's not okay. The next one I want to talk to you about is I guess on page 65, ORS 811.440. Some bicyclists don't realize that motorists can operate on a bike lane. They can operate on a bike lane, but first they must yield to us. It's not like they're trespassers on a bike lane. It's that they first have to yield to us, and then they may cross over the bicycle lane. That's probably not as much a problem down here in Ashland, because you tend to be more cooperative with our brothers and sisters in the motor vehicles. People down here don't think that there's anything inherently evil about driving a car today. No. Okay. Well, some people where I live think that's the case. But let me tell you about a good law, and that's on page 66, ORS 811.490. Just as bicyclists have the right of way on the sidewalk, bicyclists also have a right to not be car doored. Novel concept, but it's been the law for a long, long time. And what is the first thing that motorists say to a bicyclist when they car door a bicyclist? Like, what the hell are you thinking? You know, I mean, you're getting your blood all over my leather. You're a biohazard, you know? I mean, look at me. I'm in my Mercedes and, you know, you just rode into my car door. No, that's not it. You cannot open your car door where it's going to interfere with overtaking bicyclists. were that we were locomotives, the car door would be knocked 150 feet by the bicyclist. I have a YouTube video and a YouTube channel. It's called Vulnerable Advocate. And on it, we made a video of a car door getting knocked down the street by a bicyclist, my daughter, and then exploding. And it was like every bicyclist's dream, you know? And you check it out, it's pretty good. So, the thing is that why is it that motorists open up their car doors without looking over their shoulders and yielding to us? Is it that we're invisible? No. I will tell you what it is. The cervical range of motion of the human species has changed over time. Ever since saber-toothed tigers became a thing of the past, humans don't have to turn their heads quickly to look behind them anymore. We used to be so good, it's like, oh, saber-toothed tiger! But now, it's bicycles. And who's afraid of a bicycle? Nobody. So people think that it's so, they don't even have to turn their necks anymore. You know, and after a while, if you don't turn your neck, you know, you're not very good at turning your neck. And then people get to think, well, but it's okay to just look in my mirrors, isn't it? No, it's not enough. The mirrors are there for convenience for you. You've got to do a shoulder check. In Europe, what they teach people is to open a car door, not with your left hand on the driver's side. They teach you to open the car door with your right hand. Because to do that, you've got to turn your body, and maybe you will look behind you to see that somebody's coming behind you. You know? So what we need to do is to also help law enforcement to know that for a long time it's not even interesting anymore. It's illegal to car door a bicyclist. Done. It's not interesting anymore. For those of you who are bike riders who think that somehow different laws apply to you, on page 66, I'm sorry to tell you, ORS 814.400, you are vehicles. And you got to follow the cops love to bust bicyclists for DWI, for speeding. They will bust you for careless driving if they can. It's like rare game. You know? The laws apply to you. I'm not going to talk about the rules of the road because you know them. But the problem for most motorists is that when they went through driver's training, they were like, imagine, you remember when you were 15? Well, the finer points of bicycle riding and pedestrianhood in driver's training, what, were you interested in those things? No. Why? Because it was so uncool to walk and ride a bike. You want to get in a car. It's driver's training. It's not bicycle training. You want to be a car driver. And anyway, people don't really teach us about what are the bicycle and the pedestrian laws. In my view, we've got Safe Routes to School now that's doing a great job, but in my view, we ought to have a certification in elementary school for all school kids to learn the basics about bicycle and pedestrian law so that their parents can know when they bring home the certificate that at least they know some of the laws. And for those of you who have sleeping problems, I'd just like to add that this deck of cards, along with the many articles that I've written, is available to you as a sleeping aid. And please take a deck of cards if you know teachers, law enforcement officers, folks who work with kids. Give them some of the cards. The cards are 52 questions and answers about Oregon bicycle and pedestrian law. No kidding. And they're custom Q's and A's. And on our website, we also have them available. We print them at our own cost. Cycle Oregon is one of our partners. And we distribute these all through the state. So they're really cool. They've got good artwork. They're maybe above elementary school level, but middle school kids can use them. And you can use them to torture middle schoolers and high schoolers who think that they know everything. Because they don't. And make sure that you look at the questions and answers yourself, because you will be humbled, as I was humbled, when I tried to answer them all correctly. Because the laws are fairly complicated, and it's a good way to learn about the laws. On page 66 and 67, ORS 814.410 is an awful law. And the reason it's an awful law is because it contains traps for us. I'm going to tell you that this law governs your relationship to pedestrians and motor vehicles when you're on the sidewalk. The first part of it is this. You have a right-of-way on the sidewalk and in the crosswalk so long as you approach those places on a bike no faster than walking speed. What that is designed to do is to make it so that the motorists are not surprised by you coming out of nowhere at high speed. You don't have to go at a walking speed when there's no cars around. You just have to do it when you expect the cars to yield to you. If you're going for a ride with your daughter on her rollerblades and your son with his jog stroller and your cousin with her skateboard, and you go to the crosswalk to cross in front of the cars, even though you could totally smoke them on your bike at high speeds, you have to go slower than them if you want to have the right of way on the sidewalk and in the crosswalk. A walking speed is the speed limit for you. And that is the price you pay for that right of way. And because you've got such a fast steed called a bicycle. The next thing, and this is a big trap for us, you must yield the right of way to pedestrians on the sidewalk. That's easy. When you pass a pedestrian on the sidewalk, you must give them an audible signal. If you don't, and they gesticulate to their friend and hit you in the nose and break their scaphoid in their wrist, or if they stagger and fall or just turn around and there you are, you ran them down, you will be the one who gets the ticket. Because you must give them an audible signal. You don't have to have a bell or a siren. You have to have a voice that says bicyclist. Do not say passing on your left, because the innate human death wish will manifest and they will move to the left. Do not give them an opportunity to express their death wish on your time. Okay. And so we have tried to change those laws, and we've been completely unsuccessful. I've been spending the last 2 decades working in the legislature, and I can tell you that I have failed every way that it's possible to fail in front of legislators, and I failed multiple times trying to change these laws, so we are stuck with them. Next is a very important one. On page 67, RSA 14.420, failure to use the bike lane. The good news is you get a bicycle lane. The bad news is you have to use it. It's the old quid pro quo. This for that. And the reason that it's so important is if there's a bicycle lane and you don't use it and you get hit, unless you establish that you're out of the bicycle lane for one of the reasons that I'm happy to say I was one of the people who write into paragraph 3 on page 67, such as you're passing another bike, you're preparing to make a left turn, in other words, you're cycling out of the bike lane to get over to the left side, you're avoiding debris or other hazardous road conditions, such as a UPS truck parked on top of the bike lane. Unless you have in your mind one of those reasons that you're not in the bike lane, you are kind of like a trespasser on the roadway. So you really want to think about that before you leave the bike lane. And it's kind of a tough deal because some people like me, we don't really like bike lanes sometimes because they tend to not be swept as often as the roadway. But I'll tell you what, you really want to think about why is it that I'm not in the bike lane and what am I going to say if some bonehead runs me over? Because the law requires that if there's a bike lane, you use it. Next, ORS on page 68. This is the time for my version of poetry and scripture. ORS 814.430 is the Bicyclist Bill of Rights. And the reason that I elevate it to that level is that lawyers learn that that which is not given is taken away. And this law is said to be improper use of lanes. But what it really is the granting of your right to the road. Because what it doesn't take away, it gives you. And we've got this historical right to the road, and this law expresses it in a negative way. And you can see that it's kind of long. I'm going to express this, and there's a parenthetical that kind of does it too there, in a positive. So that here is what our right to the road is. Now, I'm not talking about a bicycle lane. What I'm talking about is a regular traffic lane. We have a right to take the whole lane. The whole lane. Anytime, all the time. So long as we do not slow down the speed of traffic. And the speed of traffic is not exactly the speed limit. It's the speed at which motorists are going, which we know is about 10 miles an hour over. So you don't get to be vigilantes to slow the cars down by plugging the cars when they should be going at the speed limit. No. If you're slowing the cars down, you have to ride as far to the right as practicable, which just means practical, right? But you've got in paragraph 2C a host of reasons for why it is that you can take the whole lane. And you are able to and should take the whole lane for many of the things that you see in a lane that makes it so that you can't safely ride as far to the right as practicable, even if it means that motorists must slow down or stop, including the kitchen sink being in the lane, or a dog, or debris, or a car door where they've got their windows tinted so dark you can't tell if somebody's going to open up the car door and hit you. And if you look at it, you will see that I'm not exaggerating in paragraph 2C. All of those things give you the right to trump the motorist's right to go faster than you until the hazard is gone, at which point you must give them back that part of the lane by moving over as far to the right as practical. Unless you are on a one-way, in which case you can ride as far to the left or as far to the right as practicable because it's a one-way street. Now, that's not where there's a bike lane. I mean where there's no bike lane. You can also ride two up side by side so long as you don't slow down the normal speed of traffic, which means that if motorists, and you're riding side by side, if motorists can easily go around you, you can stay two up. If motorists can't go easily around you, such as that there's oncoming traffic, you've got to go single file and ride as far to the right as practical. It is not your right to plug the road with yourselves when you have room to allow them to share the road with you. You've got the narrow width of track. You've got the power to take the complete lane away from them when you think it's necessary, reasonably. You must give it back. And what you need to do is to cooperate with folks, because I can't tell you how many times I have had motorists, legislators, judges, and jurors say, well, I just can't because it's there. You can also take the whole lane to turn left, just like a motorist can make motorists behind them stop in order to turn left. You can make motorists stop so that you don't have to turn left on the far right side of the road. So while this is phrased in the negative, it is actually your right to the roadway. And it's, I think, one of the most important laws out there. And what comes with this incredible power that we have are certain responsibilities, such as, and this is kind of a clunky one on page 68 and 69, RSA 14.440, the signal laws. Let me tell you, I was too cool to signal and give hand signals until I was about 25. My sons, I have two of them, just passed from being too cool to not being too cool to signal. They were about 24 when they weren't too cool to signal anymore. And the signaling thing is really important because it helps to combat the urban deer phenomenon, and also, if you ever are in a situation where you're turning left and somebody hits you from behind, you better have had a signal going, because it's a total CYA for you. If you didn't signal, I'll tell you, a juror who's got an injury case for a bicyclist who didn't signal looks at it like a juror looks at a car driver who decided to turn without signaling. And it's not okay. And you have to signal for 100 feet, not only turns but stops. You know, and what I do when I'm talking to people who are racers is say, look, you guys do it for each other in the peloton, right? You're like, you guys drive me crazy with your signaling. You're pointing out gravel and glass, go up, down, car back, car forward, I can't even tell all these hand signals. You guys, I think you're doing gang signs with us. You know, all you've got to do is signal turns and stops. And the law allows you to put your hands back on the handlebars to operate and shift and operate the brakes. You don't have to have like 100 continuous feet if you've got to slow down to turn the corner. But you've got to attempt to have 100 feet. And it's kind of a CYA, but it also makes it so, I'll tell you, once you get into the habit, motorists are really cool with it. You can, particularly on a multi-lane one-way, you can pass through really busy traffic. using hand signals, because the motorists know what you're going to do. And so it's a good and important skill, but also it's part of the legal requirements. All right, and on a lighter note on page 69, ORS 814.470, I want you to know that you can go home and sleep more safely in your beds, because the Oregon State Police are requiring those bicyclists to use their bicycle seats. And if you have a bicycle seat, you must use it by law. So, just don't forget that. And I don't know where some of these laws came from. Next one on page 71. This is also a huge one. Bicycle equipment requirements. ORS 815.280. This is the only one I really want to talk about. Is all bicycles are illegal as they come out of the shop because they don't have front headlights, right? If car manufacturers sold cars without headlights, it would be like toward heaven for lawyers. I mean, it would be crazy. And the thing is that motorists expect bicyclists to have lights on at night. The law requires you to have lights on at night. All you have to do is have a front white light. You could have a little blinky light. Even if you don't need a light to see where you're going, you need it for CYA. Because if somebody hits you, what happens is, and I see this over and over again, a motorist runs a stop sign, hits a bicyclist, the bicyclist didn't have a light on, the motorist says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you, I was texting, I hit you, it's all my fault." And then 2 weeks later, when the bicyclist sends the insurance adjuster their bill for their broken collarbone, the adjuster says, "Oh, Mr. Smith, I see here that you didn't have your headlights on." Headlights? It was on a bike. You didn't have your headlights on your bike, sir, and for that reason, this collision was your fault. And the bicyclist is astonished because they had a front reflector. That's part of the Consumer Product Safety Commission 16 reflector system, which is totally inadequate and illegal under Oregon law. You've got to have a front white light. And you only need a rear red reflector. So get your light, because it will be awful if somebody hits you when you don't have a light and you have to deal with it. And I can tell you that jurors look at bicyclists who ride without headlights like they look at motorists who drive at night with their lights turned off. And that is not a good thing to see. So, let's talk a little bit about bicycle riding on sidewalks. There are no right ways and wrong ways on sidewalks. You can ride on sidewalks. However, in municipalities in Oregon, bicycle riding on sidewalks in the urban core areas has been made illegal. But the thing is that nobody knows where, because nobody's got money except Medford, Oregon, to put little signs on the sidewalks telling people where they can and can't ride. So what we've done is laboriously collected at page 77 an entire chapter that includes Ashland on page 79. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but you can't ride or operate a bike in the central business district or commercial zone, which I'm assuming you know where that is, because I don't. And I don't know what the hell a central business district or commercial zone is. But look at the fine. The maximum fine is like $500. So I hope you're not driven underground by getting a ticket for one of these things and then failing to appear. Countless lives have probably been ruined in Ashland by people who have been cited for violation of this. Are there signs in Ashland telling you where you can and can't ride?
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect.
There's a few.
All right, well that is excellent.
Richmond Church.
Well, in Oregon, I would say 95% of the communities have no signage whatsoever, and nobody knows what this law is. It's completely arbitrarily enforced. Nobody really understands it. So we've included those sections in here so at least you know kind of where you stand or don't stand. So we're just to the end of this, and this is sort of the slow drum roll, because I want to tell you about something that is, you know, we have a great populist state. You know, you may have noticed that with some of our politics. Home of the referendum, the initiative, and recall, it came from us. A person named William U. Wren, who's got a statue in Oregon City that recognizes him. And we've had some great populist movements, and one of them is described in this article on page 103, and it's got a clunky name, citizen-initiated violation prosecution. And the reason that it's so important, if you take a look at it, is that this law says that in Oregon, if the police can't or won't cite a driver for dangerous driving, I don't mean like a crime, but it's on page 103, if they can or won't cite a driver for failing to yield the right-of-way to a bicyclist in a bike lane, illegal right turn, failing to stop or yield to a bicyclist on a sidewalk, any of these violations, all the way up to careless driving, you, all of you, can cite them just like a police officer, and when they're convicted in traffic court, the violation conviction is the same as if a police officer had issued the ticket. There is a recipe in here which will tell you how to do it. Please do not cheap shot this process. And the reason for it is that if you do it because you're getting pissy with somebody, what will happen will be that in a legislature of the future, the legislatures will say, we have to end this in Oregon. Save it for dangerous drivers where the police can't or won't cite them. Follow this, just keep your head down and keep at it, and I guarantee you that it will work. County by county in Oregon, we are teaching law enforcement, judges, and clerks in the circuit courts how to use this very important law. And it really levels the playing field for us. There's also a section in here about, well, what do you do in the case of an accident? What do you expect from a lawyer? I am a lawyer. If you scratch the surface underneath, I am a lawyer. And I will not tell you about that because it's obvious. If you get in a big accident, it'll be great because lawyers will send you refrigerator magnets and they'll flock to your house to represent you. It's when you have a small injury or when you have a property damage injury that you can't get a lawyer to return your phone call. So there's an article in here that's called Accidents That Result in Property Damage, because 1/3 contingent fee of $125 fender set is $40 and no lawyer can make money doing that. You have to do it for yourself. So follow the guide that I put in there, represent yourself. Do not let drivers and insurance companies get away with cheap shotting us just because not much money is involved. We have got to stand up for our rights. And if you feel like you're getting jacked around, there's a section in the book called Insurance Company Regulations. And for you and everybody else, if you look at that section, what you can do is say to an adjuster who's being abusive, not calling you back, not responding to your written requests, here's what you can say. I want to have a good relationship with you. I went to a workshop the other night, and I was taught about the rules that you insurance adjusters have to follow as enforced by the Oregon Insurance Commission. And just to make sure that you know, and I know what the rules are, I'm going to scan and fax them to you so that you know what the rules are. Because what I learned at this conference was that if you don't respect me and if you don't follow the rules, I'm supposed to report you. I don't want to do it. But I will, and I know how. So, treat me properly. And if you are still stymied, call me up and I'll help you, because I feel very strongly like it's the little cases that end up being the ones where people get tormented so that they feel like, in addition to being injured, they're being insulted by the system. And nobody should have that happen. So thank you for coming. And before you go, you can go. You don't have to stay for the questions if you want to go. Take not only the cards, but take these things. I mean these cards. But also take these little cards, because these little cards contain the laws that I just went over with you with statutory citations. And that's kind of a nice summary that you can use to just kind of know the ones that I tried to cover, because these are the ones that I think are so important. So I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you for coming. Be safe. So, sir.
It's a hot summer evening, and I've been riding all day, and I'm in Salem, downtown Salem. And I stopped to head east on this major highway, the 4-lane highway. It's 5 o'clock, traffic zooming out. I've got an 8-foot shoulder, plenty of room. However, as I get out there, all of a sudden there's a right exit.
Yes.
The cars are zooming by 100 miles an hour, and I have to get across that exit.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out.
It's very tough. This is the high-speed arterial that maybe used to be a road, but now has exits and entrances.
Yes.
These are really important arterials for us, but we have to learn how to ride around them. And here's the way you do it. This is not about the law. This is about survival. It's the law of survival. What you do is you ride along that exit or along that entrance until you can see that there is a sufficient break in the traffic that you can cut across that exit or that entrance and resume your course along the main traveled part of the roadway. You must yield the right-of-way to overtaking traffic on those exits and entrances, which makes it so that you kind of follow an interesting path, because sometimes you find yourself going 20, 50 feet down an exit that you're not intended to take and watching over your shoulder so that you can cut across and get back over. And I'll tell you, that's the way it is. Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what your opinion is on communicating, what the etiquette is around communicating the right set of responsibilities to other cyclists. Just this morning, I had someone on an electric bicycle coming straight down the lane at me, right in my face, and I said, "Hey, this is in the bike lane on 60." So how do you kind of convey that?
Well, the great thing about our community is that there are enough of us bicyclists now that we kind of have some different elements to it. And some of us belong to the anarchist caucus. Some of us are sort of, rule-oriented. And it's kind of tough because there are times where sometimes bicyclists feel like other bicyclists are letting us all down because they're being jerk-offs. And what are you going to do about it? Unfortunately, it's not people like you who are the problems. You're the law abiders. And you just have to, just like in every other part of society, kind of choose your shots and figure out when is it going to be hopeless and when isn't it. I give presentations to racers who tend to be a little bit intense, competitive folks, and you can kind of take it up to a point, and then they don't want to hear it anymore. And it's just kind of it's tough, and when you feel like you're being let down by your own community, it kind of makes you go through a slow boil, because it's you next time that angry motorist is going to cheap shot because of some bicyclist who gave him the finger 5 intersections ago. And what are you going to do about that? I don't know. I mean, it's tough. We just try to raise it the lowest common denominator, and by our own actions, we show people how we ride, and hopefully that we make a positive, a positive model for folks. That's the best I can think of. Yes, sir.
So what constitutes a bike lane?
What constitutes a bike lane? A bike lane is defined in the Oregon administrative rules as a lane that exists that has an 8-inch wide paint stripe and its insignia and signage designating as a bicycle lane. What a lot of people don't realize is that in traffic laws now, what ODOT has done for us, and counties have followed the lead, is to attempt to create a place to the right of the fog line, which is a paved portion of the roadway, for use by people riding bikes, pushing strollers, running, and things like that. It's a little bit of a paved portion on the shoulder. And what happens to me all the time is people come in and say, I got run down in the bike lane. And I say, well, show me the picture. And I see that where they got hit was not in a bike lane, because it was a 4-inch wide paint stripe. That was a fog line. And you don't have the right-of-way on the shoulder. You've got a right to be on the shoulder and not get run down, but you don't have the right-of-way. So get clear on what's a bike lane. 8 inches wide and appropriate signage. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry if you've already covered this. Riding the opposite direction of the flow of traffic in the bike lane.
All right. This is really tough, because I cannot point to you where in the traffic code it says that you cannot ride wrong way in a bike lane. But I can tell you that every law enforcement officer and every juror who ever sees somebody riding the wrong way in the bike lane will say, I know that's wrong, I can't find the law, but I know it's wrong and it's illegal. And so don't ever do it. And when I get somebody who's riding the wrong way in a bike lane that gets hit by a car, invariably the car driver says, I had no idea somebody's going to be coming that way. I never take their case because I know that I will lose. Yes?
Before I start, I'm Bill Hyman, and I teach at the Virgin Court System, Municipal Court System here in Ashland.
Yes.
For bicycle violation. That does happen here also as well. And
I saw her nodding over here, so she's seen all this stuff.
Let me share with you that in Ashland, the police do enforce the bicycle laws. 13 people last Saturday realized that. Spent all day in class. And I just want you to know that they also will not enforce the bicycle lane rule if it's unsafe for you to be there. They understand that, and the chief has made that very clear. So the police want you to be safe, but they will enforce the laws here. So
that's great.
Obey the law.
That's great. Yes, sir.
Relative to ORS 814420, I commute daily from Ashland to Talent. Part of my ride takes me on or adjacent to Highway 99. Adjacent to Highway 99 is a bike path. I choose not to ride in the bike path because of roots, glass, gravel.
Yeah.
There is an 8-inch lane to the right of the fog line on the newly paved section. However, that narrows down to maybe 6 inches as you get past that.
Okay.
Am I at risk of breaking the law riding on 99 versus the bike path?
So the question is, what do you do when there's a bicycle path that isn't safe? Do you have to use it? And, you know, first of all, bicycle paths came along before bicycle lanes. They are not very well engineered, and in fact, they're kind of disfavored anymore. And what you'll see is these exceptions that we put into paragraph 3 of ORS 814.420 on page 67 include a situation where the person is avoiding debris or other hazardous road conditions. And I would tell you that roots, bad engineering, the inability to go more than about 10 miles an hour because it's such a crappy path, or other users on it who are basically clogging the multi-use path, are valid and legitimate reasons to not be on the bike path and to go out in the lane on the road. Now, will that automatically always work? Well, if you get a ticket, I will help you for free to defend it. I can tell you that, and I don't get called on that very often. But I'll tell you, you've got to use those exceptions and have them in your mind so that if a police officer pulls you over, you can say, officer, I was following the law. If you take a look at it, you'll see that the exception was in my mind when I left the bike path or the bike lane, and I was going to go back there as soon as I could safely ride there on my commute home. But riding safely on a bike lane or a bike path does not mean being limited to 10 miles an hour because it's engineered in such a crappy manner. Yes, sir.
That's really a multi-use path that he's describing.
Okay, well, if it's a multi-use path, let's just say it is
not a bike lane.
All right, so a bicycle path is different from a multi-use path. And if you look at the ORS, you will see that multi-use path is a term that has not even made it into our Oregon Revised Statutes yet. I'm embarrassed to say we don't even know in the law, at least according to the statutes, what a multi-use path is. So those sidewalk laws and those bike path, bike lane laws just don't apply. And in fact, has anybody seen the multi-use path that goes along the Columbia River between Marine Drive and the Columbia River? You know, that offside? Well, that multi-use path has had collisions between bicyclists, and the question was, well, what law applies? And they called me as an expert witness in this case between these two bicyclists. And the fact of the matter is that there were no laws that applied. It was like the thing that I was telling you about how when we're pedestrians walking in a crowded place, we don't collide. Well, sometimes we do collide, but there's no laws on multi-use paths until something happens to establish them. Yes, ma'am.
On the multi-use path,
yes.
Can electric-assisted bicycle be on multi-use?
Electric-assisted bicycles on multi-use paths My associate Charlie G from Portland just passed the bar exam. Do you know Charlie?
I don't think
He
there's
does.
a law.
Huh?
I don't think it's one way or the other.
I don't think there's a law one way or the other either. And there is a whole section of law about electric bicycles and electric scooters and motorbikes and motorized skateboards that's kind of technical. And I can remember it for about 10 minutes. I'm able to remember the bike stuff, but it's really kind of technical. ODOT's a good source of information about that, and I'm afraid I'm not. Yes, sir.
Walking speed, is there a legal understanding in terms of miles per hour?
Oh, God, I love that. All right, so normal walking speed. I'm a lawyer. So what do you expect a lawyer who represents bicycle riders to do? Is to say that a normal walking speed is kind of fast. So what is the world record for walking? It's 10.2 miles an hour. Now, is that abnormal? Was that a space alien who was going 10.2? No, it was a normal human. They had 2 legs and they were just fast. And that's normal. So it's 0 to 10.2 miles an hour. However, a juror might decide that 10.2 miles an hour is not a normal walking speed, and it's up to the jury. However, there's legal authority, I think, for faster than 3 miles an hour, which is what most folks would say a regular walking speed is. Okay, yes ma'am.
So you told us about our rights and what the regulations are about riding on sidewalks.
Yes.
Why would we ride on the sidewalk? What's the occasion?
Why do we ride on sidewalks?
Because we're afraid of getting hit.
Well, for a lot of people, they're afraid to ride in the roadway. For some parents, they feel like their children are not ready to ride in the road or even in the bicycle lane. For me, sometimes I want to be on the sidewalk riding because I am on a one-way street that's against where I want to go, and I want to go to a storefront. And I want to ride on the sidewalk because I've got on seedy bike shoes, S-I-D-I, and you cannot walk with seedy bike shoes. You will fall on your ass. So I want to ride on the sidewalk. But I can't ride on the sidewalk in downtown places because I don't want to get a ticket. And after all, I'm a bike wire, so I have no excuse whatsoever. So I've come up with a clever little thing. What I do is I put my foot in the pedal, and I don't put myself over the top tube. I push my bike like it's a little scooter, and I say that I'm not riding my bike, I'm pushing my bike. And if you're a police officer and you look at me with the stink eye, I start walking my bike. So that's why, in my view. Yes, ma'am.
Well, now that we all know the laws, who is teaching the drivers these laws?
Well, part of it is we're teaching the drivers. I'm hoping that in many municipalities in Oregon, what will happen is that there will be share the road safety classes that people go to as a result of getting tickets so that they can get a certification of having completed a share the road safety class. Instead of being grumpy and paying a fine, they get to get out of the ticket, pay for the tuition of the class, and learn how to drive more safely. I'm hoping that we can help law enforcement folks to know what the laws are, but it's a huge job. And one of the things that I try to do in these things is to speak not only to us bicyclists, but to car drivers, to make it so that it's not an us versus them mentality. Sometimes it feels that way, but we've really got to raise the lowest common denominator out there because we're such vulnerable users of the roadway. Yes, sir.
I think that I've had every violation committed against me that you mentioned tonight. From my wife driving into a drain and fell.
Yes.
To a car cutting me off while making the left turn lane.
Yeah.
And virtually everything.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how many of these talks have you given to police officers who should be, I think, writing a hell of a lot more tickets?
Well, I can tell you this. I've had some of the best turnouts by police officers in this part of the state that I've ever had, number one. Number two, you've got to understand from a law enforcement perspective, they don't have visions of sugar plums in their minds, they have visions of violent home burglary. And when they stop to give a ticket to somebody and take 20 minutes to give somebody a ticket, they feel oftentimes like it is interfering with their ability to investigate some violent felony. or some sex abuse of a child. And they feel like they've got to take their scarce resources and put them where they most count. And one of the things we've got to understand is that in law enforcement, traffic law enforcement is not at the top of the food chain. And so when they do this and give tickets to folks, they are really doing us a favor because they are trying to do too much with too little resources. And what we've got to do, I think, is to recognize that just as how long the walk signal stays walk before it goes don't walk, that's not an engineering question, it's a political question. Those things are set by the clamor of the people to say, I can't get across this, my grandma can't get across the street while the walk's going. You've got to make the walk longer. And what we've got to say to our city councils, to our police chiefs is, we want more resources for traffic law enforcement. We've got to do it through our school groups and our community groups. We've got to back our officers up. We have to learn the cell phone numbers for our district officers. There's 3 shifts in a 24-hour period. We've got to know the cell phones of each of our 3 district police officers so they know who we are, we know who they are, and we know that we're watching each other's back. If we can give them that, then what they'll begin to do is to identify with, oh, that's Joe riding his bike to work. I've been seeing him every day for 8 years. That's my boy Joe. And when they start to think about us that way, then they start to take it personally. And that's what we want to do. Yes, sir.
What's the rate of follow-up in terms of law enforcement on called-in incidents?
Well, it depends. You know what I like to do? I like to learn the non-emergency phone number for law enforcement if I don't know my district officer. Because generally speaking, maybe you'll be on hold for a while, but you'll get somebody who will deal with you where it's not somebody grumpy because you called 911 because somebody parked on the sidewalk down the street from your house. So that's a good place. Another way to do it is to go to the non-emergency dispatch number. And you can find these in the blue pages of the blue pages of the phone book or on the internet. And what you can do is, if you can find somebody who's a human, not an answering machine, at the police department or the sheriff's office somewhere, and tell them in a way that sort of engages them, then maybe you can get their attention. But it's pretty tough to get to a human these days, sometimes. Okay, next question. Yes, sir?
If you have, let's say, about 3 feet on the right side of the white line, are you required to be in that 3 feet, or can you be in the lane?
Well, if you're not slowing down cars, you can be out in the lane, take the lane. If you can ride on the fog line or over to the right side of the fog line, and there's not a bunch of gravel or a bunch of debris there, and you can do it safely and be seen, and if otherwise you'd be slowing down cars, you need to take it. You need to ride as far to the right as practical. If you're slowing down cars, you don't have to pull into somebody's driveway and stop to let them go by. The fact is that the width of track of a bicycle is so narrow, and a lane is like 12 to 16 feet wide. There's enough room for us. All the motorist has to do is to slightly go over the center line of the road. And what a lot of Americans don't realize is that if you let your left side tires on your car touch a double yellow line, it doesn't mean they're going to vaporize. You know, as long as there's no oncoming traffic, you can go over a double yellow line to safely pass a bicyclist. There's no prohibition against that. You're allowed, if you have a condition in the lane, to go over the double yellow line. You don't get to drive on the far left side of the double yellow line permanently, but you can cross over the double yellow line to give somebody a safe distance in order to pass it. And that's because we have that mutual relationship with bicycles. Yes?
If you're on a one-way with a bike lane, how soon can you get over to make your left-hand turn? We have Lithia Way down here that has 3 lanes, you go 5 long, and go and make a left-hand turn, but sometimes that, you want to go and there's a break in traffic and people yell at you for not making the bike lane.
Well, what we put into the way we wrote it in the law is if you're preparing to execute a left at an intersection or into a private road or driveway, what that recognizes is that when you're cutting across the bike lane to the other lanes of traffic to turn left, it's going to take you a while, particularly if it's heavy traffic. It may take you a block to a block and a half to do it. And so the law is attempted to take into account the fact that you want to safely cycle over to get into a good position for a safe left turn. So the law is trying to be reasonable, and the legislators, when we talked to them, they said, "Oh my God, we didn't intend to kidnap people in the bike lane. You know, it's okay, you can leave it." Okay. Next question. Oh, well, yes. You almost got to go home. It's almost over, but not because of him. Now here we are. Okay.
I think a big part of cycling safety has to do with the road condition. And riding from Ashland to Jacksonville to all over the place, I noticed that there's very little cleaning for the bike lanes.
Yeah, it's tough. And I was going to say something about that. Is that the bike lanes tend to not have that high-speed sweeping action that happens in the main travel portion of the roadway from the tires. And so what happens is a lot of times there's kind of a buildup of road debris in the bike lanes. It's kind of tough. And I will tell you, I've changed in the last 5 years. I used to hate to ride my bike over any kind of road debris, and I've got 120-pound high-pressure racing tires. And the racing tires have gotten so good, and I've gotten to be kind of, I followed this guy who I admire and respect named Bob Miansky. He's an Olympic cycling race champion. And I noticed that when he rode, he would really ride over to the right, and he would ride on what we used to call the crapola, which was all the gravel and stuff. And he hardly ever gave me flat, so I started doing it. And now I really ride over, even though it's not a great traction surface, because a lot of times if it's like gravel that's been there for a while, it tends to get round and it's like little marbles. So you don't have a great traction surface, because sometimes it can be a lower coefficient of friction than a non-debris area. But it's amazing how few flats you actually get. So what I do now, I guess I've gotten older and more mellow and less militant. You just have to do what's practical. Nobody should have to ride in gravel. And you know what you can do is to say, as for your bicycle pedestrian advisory committees to your counties and cities, please sweep the bike lanes. We got kids who are trying to ride to school. Please sweep the bike lanes. It's a good thing. It makes it so that this is the user-friendly entry-level place where we're trying to get people to ride, and we want them to feel like we're welcoming.